The crystal glass slipped from Jordan's hand. It shattered on the marble floor, and for a moment the entire restaurant fell silent. But Jordan didn't hear the crash. She didn't notice the eyes turning toward her. All she could see was the ring. That ring, her mother's ring. On the hand of the man in the corner booth, Joseph Carmichael sat there, surrounded by 3 executives in tailored suits, discussing merger projections and stock portfolios. He was everything the media said he was: powerful, commanding, untouchable. His silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His Patek Philippe watch gleamed as he gestured, making a point about quarterly earnings, and on his right hand, the emerald ring her mother never took off. Jordan's legs moved before her mind caught up. She crossed the dining room in long, determined strides, her black apron still tied around her waist. The other servers watched, confused. Her manager called her name from behind the bar. She ignored them all. "Excuse me." Her voice cut through the conversation like a blade. The 3 executives looked up, startled. Joseph's eyes met hers, steel gray, calculating, completely unreadable. "Yes?" His tone was polite but dismissive, the voice of a man, accustomed to being briefly interrupted, and quickly obeyed. Jordan's heart hammered against her ribs. She pointed at his hand, her finger trembling. "That ring, where did you get it?" Joseph glanced down at the emerald, then back at her with mild irritation. "I'm in the middle of a meeting. If you need to discuss, where did you get that ring?" The restaurant went completely silent. Jordan's voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, bouncing between the elegant chandeliers and expensive art. Every patron, every server, every person in that space turned to stare. Her manager was already rushing over, panic written across his face. But Jordan didn't move. She stood there, 5 feet from the most powerful man in Chicago, her chest heaving, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Joseph set down his fork slowly. His expression shifted. Something flickered behind those cold eyes. Recognition? Guilt? Fear? Jordan couldn't tell, but she saw him swallow, saw his jaw tighten. "Miss, I think you should," one of the executives began. "That's my mother's ring," Jordan said, her voice breaking. "She wore it every single day of her life. It was custom made for her by my father. There's an inscription inside. Forever, Thomas. My father's name." Joseph's face went white. The executive on his right leaned forward. "Sir, should I call security?" But Joseph didn't answer. He was staring at Jordan like he'd seen a ghost. His hand, the one wearing the ring, began to shake. He pulled it back slowly, hiding it under the table. "How?" His voice came out hoarse, barely audible. "How do you know about the inscription?" Jordan's manager arrived, grabbing her elbow. "Jordan, I am so sorry, Mr. Carmichael. She's new, she doesn't—" "Let her speak." Joseph's command was quiet but absolute. The manager's hand fell away instantly. Jordan took a step closer. The tears were falling now, hot and unstoppable. "My mother died 3 years ago. That ring disappeared from her jewelry box 2 weeks before she passed. We thought it was stolen at the hospital. We filed a police report. We searched everywhere." She was shaking now, her whole body trembling with rage and grief and confusion. "So I'm going to ask you one more time." Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. "Why are you wearing my mother's ring?" Joseph stood up slowly. He was tall, over 6 feet, and his presence filled the space like a storm cloud. The executives watched him with concerned expressions. The entire restaurant held its breath. And then, Joseph Carmichael, the man Forbes called the untouchable titan, the billionaire who'd built an empire on steel and determination, the man who never showed weakness, broke down. His face crumpled, his shoulders sagged. A sound escaped his throat, something between a gasp and a sob. He reached out, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh God, you're Elena's daughter." Jordan froze. Her mother's name, he'd said her mother's name. "How do you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Joseph looked up at her and his eyes were full of tears. "Because," he said, his voice breaking completely. I loved her. I loved her more than anything in this world. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Jordan stepped back, her mind reeling. You what? Joseph wiped his eyes roughly, trying to compose himself, but his hands were still shaking. The ring caught the light, her mother's emerald, impossibly green against his trembling fingers. Everyone out. His voice cracked but held authority. The three executives exchanged glances, grabbed their briefcases, and left without a word. Joseph turned to the restaurant manager. Close the dining room. Now. Sir, we have reservations. I'll buy out every reservation for the next month. Close it. The manager nodded quickly and began ushering confused patrons toward the exit. Within minutes, the elegant space was empty except for Jordan and Joseph. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the white tablecloths. Jordan stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself. You're lying. I'm not. Joseph pulled out a chair, gesturing for her to sit. Please, I'll tell you everything. Why should I believe anything you say? Her voice was sharp, defensive. You could have stolen that ring. You could be. Your mother's favorite color was yellow, Joseph said quietly. Not bright yellow. Soft yellow, like early morning light. She collected vintage teacups from estate sales. She hummed when she was nervous. Always the same song. Moon River. Jordan's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of the chair. Those details. Those tiny, intimate details that no stranger could know. She sat down slowly, never taking her eyes off him. Who are you? Joseph sat across from her, his shoulders heavy with something that looked like decades of weight. I met your mother 26 years ago. I was 29, she was the most extraordinary person I'd ever met. She was married to my father, Jordan said coldly. I know. Joseph's voice was thick with regret. I know she was. And I tried. God, I tried to stay away. He pulled the ring off slowly, held it up to the light. The emerald glowed like a living thing. This ring was made for her by Thomas, your father. I know because. He closed his eyes. Because she told me. She told me everything. Jordan's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother and I. Joseph struggled with the words. We had a relationship, a connection. It lasted 2 years. The restaurant seemed to tilt sideways. Jordan gripped the table edge. You're saying you had an affair with my mother? It wasn't. Joseph stopped, shook his head. That word makes it sound cheap. It wasn't cheap. It was. His voice broke again. It was everything. Jordan wanted to stand up, to leave, to run. But her body wouldn't move. 23 years of memories were reshaping themselves in her mind. Her mother, kind, gentle, devoted Elena, carrying on a secret relationship with a billionaire? It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would she? Joseph looked at her with eyes full of old pain. Because your father was dying. Jordan's breath caught. Thomas was sick, Joseph continued softly. He'd been sick for 3 years when I met Elena. The doctors gave him 2 years at most. Your mother was drowning, trying to care for him, trying to keep the house, trying to pretend everything was normal. He set the ring on the table between them. I met her at a hospital fundraiser. She was volunteering, serving coffee to donors. I spilled my drink. She laughed at how clumsy I was. We talked for 3 hours. I didn't know she was married. She didn't mention it. Jordan's mind flashed back to childhood memories. Her father's long illness, her mother's exhausted face, the medical bills piled on the kitchen counter. When I found out about Thomas, Joseph said, I tried to end it, told her I couldn't be the person who made her life more complicated. But she... He smiled sadly. She said I was the only thing keeping her alive, the only hour in her week where she wasn't a caretaker or a patient advocate or a bill collector. She said I made her feel like herself again. Tears streamed down Jordan's face. So you took advantage of her? No. Joseph's voice was firm. I loved her, and she loved me. in a different world, a different life. He stopped, his jaw clenched. But this wasn't a different world, it was this one. And in this one, she chose your father, as she should have. The sunlight shifted, casting Joseph's face half in shadow. When Thomas passed away, he continued, I thought maybe we could finally be together. Publicly, honestly, I asked her to marry me. Jordan's heart stopped. What did she say? Joseph looked at the ring, his expression unreadable. She said yes. Jordan felt the room spinning. She said yes. Then why? She couldn't finish the question. Why didn't they marry? Why had her mother never mentioned Joseph? Why had Jordan grown up believing her parents had the perfect love story? Joseph reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not touching. Because 3 days after I proposed, you came home? Jordan's eyes widened. What? You were away at college. University of Wisconsin, freshman year. Your mother was alone for the first time in years. No husband to care for, no daughter to worry about, just freedom. Joseph's voice grew softer. We were planning a quiet ceremony. Just us, a judge, maybe 2 witnesses. Nothing public. We knew people would talk, would judge the timeline. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. Then you called her. You were crying, said you hated school, hated being away, felt guilty for leaving her alone after your father died. You wanted to come home. Jordan remembered that phone call, the homesickness that had crushed her. The way her mother's voice had sounded, strange, tight, like she was holding something back. Your mother hung up the phone, Joseph continued, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes. And I knew before she said a word. She chose me, Jordan whispered. She chose you. Joseph smiled, but it was the saddest smile Jordan had ever seen. She said, I can't do this to her. She just lost her father. If I suddenly marry a stranger, a billionaire, the press will swarm us. Jordan will think I never loved Thomas. She'll think I was cheating all along. She'll hate me. Jordan covered her mouth with her hand. I told her we could wait, Joseph said. Told her we could keep it secret until you were ready. But Elena knew better. She said you needed stability, normalcy. Not a mother running off with some rich man. She said you needed to heal. He picked up the ring again, turned it slowly in his fingers. So she gave me this. Said it was the only thing of value she owned. Said I should keep it as a promise. That someday when you were settled, happy, independent, we'd find our way back to each other. The sunlight caught the emerald, sending green fractals across the white tablecloth. But that day never came, Jordan said quietly. No. Joseph's voice was barely audible. You came home. Transferred to community college to stay close to her. Got a job to help with bills. You were so devoted, so loving. And your mother, he swallowed hard. She couldn't bring herself to disrupt your life. Every time I asked when we could try again, she'd say, soon. But soon became months. Months became years. Jordan thought about those years. Living at home, working part-time jobs, taking care of her mother who seemed tired all the time. She'd thought her mother was just grieving. Just adjusting to widowhood. She'd never imagined her mother was grieving something else entirely. Why didn't you fight for her? Jordan's voice was sharper now, anger mixing with the sadness. You're a billionaire. You could have convinced her. You could have, because I loved her. Joseph's words cut through the air like a knife. And when you love someone, truly love them, you respect their choices, even when those choices destroy you. He set the ring down between them again, a small circle of green fire on white linen. I saw her twice a year after that. Coffee shops in quiet neighborhoods, lunch at places where no one would recognize me. 1 hour, maybe 2. We'd talk about you mostly. How proud she was. How worried. How much she loved you. Jordan's chest ached. The last time I saw her, Joseph's voice cracked. She was thin, so thin. Said she was just tired, working too much. But I knew. I could see it in her eyes. Something was wrong. She was sick, Jordan whispered. The diagnosis came 2 months later. Joseph nodded slowly. She called me. Told me she had 6 months, maybe less. Asked if I'd come see her one last time. Did you? I went to the hospital every week. Joseph's tears fell freely now. Disguised as a hospital board member doing rounds. Your mother would laugh at my terrible fake mustache. We'd hold hands when the nurses weren't looking. He wiped his eyes roughly. 2 weeks before she died, she asked me to take the ring back. Said she couldn't risk you finding it in her things. Couldn't risk you learning the truth while she was too weak to explain. Joseph looked at Jordan with raw, devastating honesty. She made me promise I'd never contact you, never tell you. Said it would only hurt you and she'd caused enough pain by loving me in the first place. Jordan's tears fell onto the table. So why are you wearing it? Joseph looked down at his hand, at the ring that had haunted him for years. Because I can't let her go. The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Jordan stared at Joseph, this stranger who'd loved her mother, who'd been written out of their family story like an inconvenient footnote. Her mind was a hurricane of conflicting emotions. Anger, grief, confusion, and something else. Something she didn't want to name. Understanding. You broke your promise, she said finally. You told me everything. You weren't supposed to tell me. Joseph met her gaze without flinching. I know, so why did you? He leaned back in his chair, exhausted, like confessing had drained every ounce of strength from his body. Because you deserved the truth. Because carrying this secret for 3 years has been destroying me. And because, he gestured toward her with a weak smile, because you're exactly like her. Fierce, uncompromising. The moment you saw that ring, I knew you wouldn't stop until you had answers. Jordan wanted to stay angry. Wanted to hold on to the righteous fury that had propelled her across the restaurant. But sitting here, looking at this broken man who'd loved her mother in secret for decades, the anger was melting into something more complicated. Did my father know? The question came out quieter than she intended. Joseph shook his head. No, Elena was certain of that. She said Thomas died believing she'd been faithful. She carried that guilt every day, but she said knowing he died at peace was worth it. Jordan thought about her father, kind, gentle Thomas who'd spent his final years in hospital beds and wheelchair ramps, who'd held her mother's hand every night, who'd whispered, I love you with his last breath. Had it all been a lie? Your father loved her completely, Joseph said as if reading her thoughts. And she loved him. What we had, it didn't erase what she felt for Thomas. Love isn't that simple. People aren't that simple. She cheated on him. Jordan's voice was flat. No matter how you explain it, that's what happened. You're right, Joseph didn't argue, didn't make excuses. She did. And she lived with that choice every day. But she also cared for him with devotion most people can't imagine. She bathed him, fed him, read to him every night, advocated with doctors and insurance companies. She gave him dignity and comfort until his last moment. He leaned forward, his voice intense. Can both things be true? Can she have failed him in one way and honored him in 1,000 others? Jordan didn't answer. She didn't know how to. The afternoon light was fading now, casting long shadows across the empty restaurant. Somewhere in the kitchen, dishes clattered. The world was continuing, indifferent to the revelations happening in this quiet corner. I need to see proof, Jordan said suddenly. I need to know you're not just making this up, using details you read somewhere. Joseph nodded slowly. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through it with trembling fingers, then handed it to her. These are from the last year of her life. I took them when she wasn't looking. Jordan took the phone with shaking hands. The first photo nearly stopped her heart. Her mother, sitting in a hospital courtyard, sunlight in her thinning hair, smiling at something off camera. She looked fragile but happy, genuinely happy in a way Jordan hadn't seen during those final months. Jordan swiped. Another photo. Elena holding a paper cup of coffee, rolling her eyes at the camera with playful annoyance. Another. Elena's hand, thin, IV bruised, clasped around someone else's hand. A man's hand, wearing a simple silver watch, Joseph's watch. There were dozens of photos, quiet moments stolen in hospital corridors and garden benches. Elena laughing. Elena sleeping. Elena looking at the camera with such tenderness that Jordan felt like an intruder, witnessing something sacred. She never smiled like that at home. Jordan whispered. Those last months she was always so tired, so distant. Because she was pretending, Joseph said gently. Pretending she wasn't terrified. Pretending she wasn't dying. She saved her real feelings for our visits. The raw, honest, ugly truth of what she was going through. Jordan scrolled to the last photo. It was a selfie, clearly taken by Elena herself. She was in a hospital bed, her face gaunt but peaceful, and beside her, his head resting on her shoulder, was Joseph. His eyes were closed. He looked utterly exhausted, in Elena's free hand, barely visible at the edge of the frame. The emerald ring. The caption read, "My Joseph, my forever." Jordan's hands trembled so hard she nearly dropped the phone. "When was this taken?" 3 days before she died. Joseph's voice was thick. "I'd been at the hospital for 18 hours. Told your mother I wasn't leaving." The nurses pretended not to notice. He took the phone back, stared at the photo for a long moment. "She died while you were getting coffee," Jordan said, remembering. "I stepped out for 10 minutes, and when I came back—" "I was there," Joseph finished. "Hiding in the bathroom. I heard you come in. Heard you scream." Jordan stood up so fast her chair scraped against the marble floor. "You were there?" Her voice was barely controlled. "You were hiding in the bathroom while I held my dying mother's hand?" Joseph stood too, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Jordan, please, no." She backed away from him. "No, you don't get to please me. You were there. You let me think I was alone with her. You let me carry that guilt, that I'd left her alone, that she died without me. And you were right there. She asked me to hide." Joseph's voice cracked. "She made me promise. Said if you saw me, you'd have questions she couldn't answer. She wanted her last moments with you to be pure, uncomplicated." Jordan laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. "Uncomplicated?" "My mother died keeping your secret. That's not pure. That's tragic." She turned away from him, gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. Her mind was replaying that day. The hospital room, the mechanical beeping, her mother's shallow breathing, the way Elena had looked past Jordan's shoulder toward the bathroom door and smiled. "Oh, God," Jordan whispered. "She was looking at you. In those last seconds. She was looking at you." Joseph's silence was confirmation. Jordan spun around, tears streaming. "I thought she was confused, delirious. I held her hand and told her I was there, that I loved her, and she just smiled at something I couldn't see. I thought the morphine was making her hallucinate." "She saw me," Joseph said quietly, "through the crack in the door. And his voice broke completely. "I watched the woman I loved die, and I couldn't even hold her hand." The pain in his voice was so raw, so devastating, that Jordan felt her anger crack. Not break, not disappear, but crack enough to let something else through. Empathy. She hated that she felt it. Hated that any part of her could understand his suffering. "You should have told me then," she said, her voice shaking. "You should have stepped out of that bathroom and told me the truth. And destroyed your last memory of your mother." Joseph shook his head. "Elena died peacefully in your arms, believing she'd protected you from this pain. If I'd revealed myself, your final image of her would have been tainted by questions and betrayal. She didn't want that for you." Jordan sank back into her chair, exhausted. "What she wanted doesn't matter anymore. She's gone, but you're not." Joseph sat down slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "You're here. You're alive. And you have a right to be angry." "I'm so angry," Jordan whispered. "I'm angry at her for lying. I'm angry at you for existing. I'm angry at my father for dying and starting this whole mess. I'm angry at myself for not seeing it." She looked up at him through tears. "But mostly, I'm angry because I can't hate you. I should hate you. You're the man who had an affair with my married mother. You're the reason she carried guilt to her grave. I should despise everything about you." "But you don't," Joseph said softly. "No." Jordan's voice was barely audible. "Because I saw those photos. I saw how she looked at you. And I realized—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I realized I never saw her that happy at home. Not once." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Joseph reached across the table, his hand palm up, offering, not demanding. "Your mother made choices that hurt people. I made choices that hurt people. But what we had, it was real. It was love. Complicated, messy, impossible love." Jordan stared at his hand. "At the ring he still wore after all these years. Why do you still wear it?" she asked. "Why torture yourself?" "Because it's all I have left of her," Joseph said simply. "Because taking it off feels like letting her go. And I'm not ready to let her go." Jordan understood that feeling. She'd kept her mother's coffee mug unwashed for 3 months after she died. kept her voicemail saved on her phone, slept in her mother's robe because it still smelled like her lavender soap. Grief made people do irrational things. Slowly, carefully, Jordan reached across the table. Her fingers touched Joseph's palm, not quite holding his hand, just connecting. "Tell me more about her," she said quietly. "Tell me things I don't know. The real her, not the version she showed me." Joseph's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something else in them. Relief. "She hated strawberries," he said, a small smile forming. "Told everyone she was allergic because she was too embarrassed to admit she just didn't like them." Jordan laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. "I never knew that. She always said she was allergic. She sang off-key on purpose," Joseph continued, "because it made people laugh. But when she thought she was alone, she had the most beautiful voice." Jordan squeezed his hand gently. "Tell me everything." They talked for 3 hours. The restaurant staff quietly moved around them, resetting tables, dimming lights as evening approached. Jordan's manager checked on them once, saw the intensity of their conversation, and retreated without a word. Joseph told her everything. How Elena loved old movies, but only the ones that made her cry. How she collected vintage postcards from places she'd never visit. How she worried constantly about Jordan, whether she was eating enough, sleeping enough, happy enough. "She was terrified you'd end up alone," Joseph said, turning his coffee cup in circles. "Said you were too focused on taking care of everyone else. Too much like her." Jordan felt that observation hit home. At 23, she had no romantic relationships, few close friends, and spent most of her time working double shifts to pay off her mother's medical debt. "She wanted more for you," Joseph continued. "Wanted you to travel, fall in love, make mistakes, live. Instead, I'm serving coffee to billionaires," Jordan said with a sad smile. Joseph looked at her seriously. "That's going to change today," Jordan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your mother made me promise 2 things before she died." Joseph reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Thick cream-colored, expensive. She asked me to give you this if you ever found out about us." Jordan stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What is it?" "I don't know." She sealed it herself. "Made me swear I wouldn't open it." With trembling hands, Jordan took the envelope. Her name was written across the front in her mother's handwriting, the slightly crooked cursive she'd always teased her about. She turned it over, broke the seal, and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. The first was a letter. The second, she gasped. "Is that—" "A check," Joseph finished quietly, "for $300,000. Dated the week before she died." Jordan couldn't breathe. The check was made out to her, signed by Elena Mitchell in shaky handwriting. $300,000. More money than Jordan had seen in her entire life. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Where did she get this money?" "From me," Joseph said. "She refused it for years. But at the very end, she changed her mind. Called me to the hospital and said she needed to ask me something." He looked down at his hands. "She asked for money. For you. She said you'd spent your entire adult life taking care of her. Sacrificed college, relationships, dreams. She said the debt she was leaving behind would bury you. And she couldn't die knowing you'd spend the next decade drowning in bills she'd created." Jordan looked at the check, then at the letter. Her mother's words waited, inked in that familiar handwriting. "Read it," Joseph said gently. "I'll step outside. Give you privacy." "No," Jordan's voice was firm. "Stay. Please." He nodded, settled back into his chair. Jordan unfolded the letter with shaking hands and began to read aloud, her voice breaking every few words. "My darling Jordan. If you're reading this, then you know about Joseph. I'm so sorry. Sorry for the lies. Sorry for the secrets. Sorry for being human and flawed and selfish enough to love 2 men in one lifetime." Jordan paused, wiped her eyes, continued. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, sweetheart, don't let my mistakes make you afraid to love. Don't let my choices make you doubt that love is worth the risk. Because it is. God, it is." Her voice cracked completely. Joseph reached across the table, squeezed her hand. "Your father was my safety. Joseph was my passion. And you were my purpose. The reason I kept breathing when everything hurt. The reason I fought to stay alive as long as I did. The restaurant had gone completely quiet. I'm leaving you this money because you deserve a life. Not just survival. Life. Real, messy, beautiful life. Travel, study, fall in love with someone completely wrong for you. Make mistakes. Be selfish sometimes. Jordan's hands shook so hard she could barely hold the paper. And if you can find it in your heart, forgive me. Forgive Joseph. We were just two broken people who found light in each other's darkness. That doesn't excuse what we did. But maybe it explains it. The final lines were barely legible, written in the shaky hand of someone very ill. I love you, Jordan. More than words. More than life. You were the best thing I ever did. The only thing I did completely right. Be happy, baby. Please, be so happy. Jordan set down the letter and sobbed. Not quiet, dignified tears. Full-body shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. Joseph moved around the table and held her. This stranger who loved her mother, who carried 3 years of grief in his chest, who wore a dead woman's ring like a wedding band. And Jordan let him. When Jordan finally stopped crying, the restaurant was dark. The only light came from the dimmed chandeliers and the city glow through the windows. Joseph released her gently, handed her a cloth napkin to dry her eyes. She took it, wiped her face, and laughed weakly. I must look terrible. You look like your mother, Joseph said softly. Same eyes. Same strength even when you're breaking. Jordan folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope with the check. $300,000. A future her mother had bought with someone else's money and her own guilt. I can't take this, she said finally. Joseph's expression didn't change. Why not? Because it's... Jordan struggled for words. It's from you. Money you gave her. It feels wrong. Like I'm profiting from whatever this was. This was love, Joseph said firmly. Complicated, impossible love. And your mother wanted you to have it. Are you going to reject her final wish because you're too proud? The words stung because they were true. Jordan looked at the check again. $300,000 would erase her medical debt. Would let her finish college. Would give her the freedom to choose a life instead of just surviving one. She knew you'd resist, Joseph said, reading her hesitation. That's why she wrote the letter. She knew you'd need permission to accept help. I don't know how to accept this, Jordan whispered. I don't know how to forgive her. Or you. Or any of this. Joseph leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. Then don't, not today. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process. Sometimes it takes years. He reached for the ring on his finger, turned it slowly. I've spent 3 years being angry at your mother for choosing you over me. Angry at myself for not fighting harder. Angry at the universe for giving us love and then making it impossible. He looked up at her, but anger doesn't bring her back. It doesn't change what happened. It just exhausts you. Jordan thought about the last 3 years. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the weight of carrying her mother's memory without understanding who her mother really was. What do I do now? She asked quietly. Joseph smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. You live. Exactly like she asked you to. You take that money and you build a life. Go back to school, travel. Find someone who makes you feel the way your mother felt when she looked at me in those photos. And what about you? Jordan asked, what do you do? Joseph looked at the ring on his finger for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he pulled it off. Jordan's breath caught. I let her go, he said simply. He held the ring between his thumb and forefinger, the emerald catching the low light. I've carried her with me for 3 years. Worn this ring like a wedding band. Kept her photos on my phone. Visited her grave every Sunday. His voice grew thick with emotion. But she's not coming back. And holding on to her this tightly, it's not love anymore. It's refusal to move forward. He looked at Jordan with clear, honest eyes. Your mother wanted both of us to be happy. That was the whole point of the sacrifice she made. She chose your happiness over hers. The least we can do is honor that choice by actually being happy. Jordan stared at the ring in his hand. Her mother's ring. The symbol of her father's love, worn by her mother's secret lover, now being offered. What back to her? I want you to have it, Joseph said, answering her unspoken question. He placed it gently on the table between them. Your father gave it to your mother. She gave it to me. Now I'm giving it to you. Let it come home. Jordan picked up the ring with trembling fingers. It was heavier than she expected. The emerald was flawless, deep green like summer forests. She'd seen it on her mother's hand 1,000 times, never knowing the story it carried. "What if I'm not ready?" she whispered. "Then put it in a drawer," Joseph said gently. "Keep it until you are ready. But know that it's yours. Part of your history. Part of her story. And now, part of your future." Jordan slipped the ring onto her right hand. It fit perfectly. She had small hands, Joseph said with a sad smile. "Just like yours." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the conversation settling around them like dust after a storm. The restaurant staff had disappeared entirely, giving them privacy. Finally, Jordan spoke. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it? Loving her? All the pain it caused?" Joseph didn't hesitate. "No, not for a single second. Loving Elena was the best thing I ever did. Even knowing how it ended, I'd do it all again." Jordan nodded slowly, understanding settling in her chest. "Thank you for telling me, for breaking your promise." "Thank you for listening," Joseph replied. "For not hating me. I don't hate you." Jordan stood up, smoothed her wrinkled apron. "I don't know what I feel yet, but it's not hate." Joseph stood too, tall and dignified despite his earlier breakdown. "Where will you go from here?" Jordan looked at the check in her hand, then at the ring on her finger. "I think," she smiled, small but genuine. "I think I'm going to quit my job." Joseph laughed, a real, full laugh that filled the empty restaurant. "Good. You deserve better than serving people like me. People like you aren't so bad," Jordan said softly. They walked out of the restaurant together. The evening air was cool, crisp with the promise of autumn. The street was busy, couples walking hand in hand, taxis honking, the city alive with its usual chaos. But Jordan felt like she was moving through a dream. Everything looked different now. The same buildings, the same streets. But she was different. Joseph stood beside her on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets. "I suppose this is goodbye, is it?" Jordan turned to face him. "Or is this something else?" Joseph studied her carefully. "What do you want it to be?" Jordan considered the question. This man had been her mother's secret, her mother's joy, her mother's guilt. But he was also real, standing here, offering her a connection to the woman she'd thought she knew. "I want to not lose her again," Jordan said quietly. "And you're the only person who knew the parts of her I never saw." Understanding flickered in Joseph's eyes. "You want to stay in touch? If that's okay," Joseph pulled out his phone, handed it to her. "Put your number in. I'll call you next week. We can have coffee. Talk about her or not. Whatever you need." Jordan entered her number with shaking hands. "Why are you being so kind to me? Could have denied everything." "Because you're her daughter," Joseph said simply. "And because I think we both need this. Someone who understands what she meant." A black car pulled up to the curb, sleek, expensive, clearly Joseph's. The driver stepped out, opened the back door. "That's my ride," Joseph said. But he didn't move toward it. "Before I go, can I ask you something?" "Yes. What are you going to do?" "With the money." "With your life." Jordan looked down at the ring on her finger, the emerald catching the streetlight. "I'm going to finish college. Study literature like I always wanted. Maybe travel. See the places my mother collected postcards from." Joseph smiled. "She'd like that." "And I'm going to stop being afraid," Jordan continued, her voice growing stronger. "Afraid of making mistakes. Afraid of being selfish. Afraid of living." That's exactly what she wanted. Jordan stepped forward impulsively, wrapped her arms around Joseph in a tight hug. He stiffened in surprise, then slowly returned the embrace. They stood there on the busy sidewalk, two people bound by grief and secrets and a love that wasn't theirs, but somehow belonged to them anyway. "Thank you," Jordan whispered, "for loving her, for being honest, for giving me back pieces of her I didn't know were missing." Joseph's voice was thick when he replied, "Thank you for not hating me, for listening, for being exactly the person she said you were." They pulled apart slowly. Jordan wiped her eyes. "I cried too much." "So did she," Joseph said fondly. "She felt everything so deeply." He moved toward the car, then stopped, turned back. "Jordan, one more thing." "Yes." Your mother's greatest fear wasn't dying. It was that you'd spend your whole life taking care of everyone else and forget to take care of yourself." His voice was urgent. "Don't prove her right. Be selfish sometimes. Choose happiness," Jordan nodded, unable to speak. Joseph climbed into the car. The door closed with a soft final sound. Through the tinted window, Jordan saw him lift his hand in a wave. She waved back. The car pulled away, merged into traffic, disappeared. Jordan stood alone on the sidewalk, the envelope in one hand, her mother's ring on the other. Around her, the city moved and breathed and lived. People rushed past, caught up in their own stories, their own secrets, their own complicated loves. She pulled out her phone, looked at her account balance, -$800. Medical bills and survival. Tomorrow she'd deposit the check. Tomorrow her life would change. But tonight she just wanted to feel. Jordan walked slowly, then stopped, changed direction. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't have a plan, but for the first time in 3 years that felt like freedom instead of fear. She touched the ring on her finger, felt its weight, its history, its promise. "I'm going to be happy. Mom," she whispered to the night sky, "I'm going to live. Just like you wanted." The city lights blurred through her tears, but this time they were good tears, the kind her mother would have understood. 3 weeks later, Jordan stood in front of her apartment building with 2 suitcases and a plane ticket to Paris. She'd spent the first week after meeting Joseph in a daze, deposited the check, watched her account balance transform from negative to positive with so many zeros, she had to count them twice. Paid off every medical bill, every credit card, every debt that had been strangling her for 3 years. The second week, she'd quit her job. Her manager had been surprisingly understanding, almost like he'd expected it. "You never looked happy here," he'd said. "Go find whatever makes you happy." The third week, she'd enrolled in online courses, bought a plane ticket, packed her life into 2 bags, and now she was leaving. Her phone buzzed. A text from Joseph. They'd been messaging regularly. Nothing heavy, just small check-ins. Pictures of places Elena had loved. Quotes from books she'd recommended. Stories that made Jordan laugh. The text read, "Airport yet?" Jordan smiled, typed back, "Leaving in 10 minutes. Terrified." His response came immediately. Good. She'd be proud. Jordan looked up at her apartment building. Small, cramped, full of memories that weighed like stones. She'd lived here through her mother's illness, through the grief afterward, through 3 years of barely surviving. But that version of Jordan was gone now. A car horn honked. Her rideshare had arrived. Jordan threw her bags in the trunk, climbed into the back seat. "Airport, please." As the car pulled away, she watched her old life shrink in the rearview mirror. No regret. No looking back, just forward. At the airport, Jordan checked her bags and found herself with 2 hours before boarding. She wandered through the terminal, overwhelmed by the energy of people coming and going. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone had a story. Her phone rang. "Joseph." "Hello?" she answered. "Jordan, I know you're about to board, but..." He paused. "I'm here. At the airport. Gate C-17. I wanted to see you off." Jordan's heart skipped. "You're here? I hope that's okay. I wanted to give you something before you left." Jordan found him 15 minutes later, standing near a coffee shop, looking somehow both powerful and nervous. He was holding a small wrapped box. "You didn't have to come," Jordan said, but she was smiling. "I wanted to." Joseph handed her the box. "Open it." Jordan unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a vintage postcard, old, faded, showing the Eiffel Tower at sunset. She turned it over. Her mother's handwriting covered the back. "Someday I'll see this in person. Someday I'll be brave enough to go." Jordan's eyes filled with tears. "Where did you get this?" "She kept a collection," Joseph said softly. "Postcards from places she dreamed about but never visited. I've been holding on to them since she died. I thought, maybe you could visit them for her. Send her postcards from the places she never got to see." Jordan clutched the postcard to her chest. "There are more?" Joseph pulled out an envelope thick with postcards. 47. Rome, Barcelona, Tokyo, Iceland, all the places she wanted to go. Jordan took the envelope with trembling hands. This is perfect." She'd want you to have adventures, Joseph said. She'd want you to see the world she only dreamed about. They stood in comfortable silence, watching travelers rush past with rolling luggage and coffee cups and tired children. I'm scared, Jordan admitted quietly. I've never traveled alone. Never been outside the country. What if I can't do this? Joseph placed a hand on her shoulder. Then you'll figure it out. That's what traveling teaches you, that you're stronger than you think, more capable than you believe. His eyes were warm, fatherly almost. Your mother was terrified of everything, he continued. Terrified of leaving your father. Terrified of loving me. Terrified of dying. But she did it all anyway. Fear didn't stop her. It just walked beside her. Jordan nodded, understanding settling in her chest. Will you be here when I get back? I'll be here, Joseph promised. And I'll want to hear every story. See every photo. Know that you lived. The boarding announcement crackled over the speakers. Jordan's flight. She hugged Joseph tightly. Thank you. For everything, for her. For this. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey, Joseph replied. Even in this small way. Jordan pulled back, wiped her eyes, laughed. I really do cry too much. It's genetic, Joseph said with a smile. Jordan walked toward her gate, then turned back one last time. Joseph stood there watching her go, his hand raised in farewell. Just like the night they'd met. Just like he'd probably watched her mother leave 100 times before. But this time was different. This time, Jordan was choosing to leave. Choosing adventure. Choosing life. She touched the ring on her finger. Her mother's ring, her father's gift, Joseph's burden. Now her talisman. And then she walked through the gate, toward the plane, toward Paris. Toward a future her mother had bought with love and sacrifice and $300,000. The old Jordan would have been paralyzed with fear. But the new Jordan? She boarded the plane with a smile. 6 months later, Jordan sat in a cafe in Rome writing postcards. She'd been to 12 countries. Seen the Eiffel Tower at sunset, just like her mother had dreamed. Walked the streets of Barcelona. Stood on black sand beaches in Iceland. Eaten street food in Bangkok. Every city, every country, she'd bought a postcard and written to her mother. Dear Mom, I'm in Rome today. The Colosseum is more beautiful than pictures show. I wish you were here. I wish you could see this. She never mailed them. Just collected them in a growing stack, a one-sided conversation with a ghost. Her phone buzzed. Joseph, how's Italy? Jordan smiled, typed back, perfect. Sending you a photo. She snapped a picture of the postcard she was writing, sent it. His response came quickly. She'd be so proud of you. Jordan looked at the ring on her finger. She wore it every day now. Not as a reminder of secrets or pain, but as a symbol of the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of love. Her mother had loved 2 men, had made choices that hurt people, had carried guilt until her final breath, but she'd also loved fiercely, sacrificed completely, and given Jordan the greatest gift of all, permission to live without fear. Jordan finished the postcard, added it to her collection. 47 postcards from her mother's dreams, 47 that Jordan had now visited and documented. She was living the life her mother had imagined, but never achieved. And somehow, that felt like the best way to honor her. Jordan paid for her coffee, stepped out into the Roman sunshine. Tourists filled the streets, speaking dozens of languages, chasing their own dreams. She pulled out her phone, opened her messages with Joseph. Thank you, she typed, for breaking your promise, for telling me the truth, for giving me her dreams. His response came after a moment. Thank you for living them. Jordan pocketed her phone, touched the ring one more time and smiled. Her mother had chosen her. Had sacrificed her own happiness so Jordan could have stability, but now Jordan was choosing herself. Choosing adventure. Choosing the life her mother had paid for with love and secrets and $300,000. And somewhere. Jordan liked to think her mother was smiling. Not the tired smile Jordan remembered from those final years, but the real smile. The one Joseph had captured in those hidden photos. The smile of a woman who loved deeply, lived honestly, and died hoping her daughter would be brave enough to do the same. Jordan walked toward the Trevi fountain, ready for whatever came next, because she'd learned something important in these 6 months of travel and postcards and healing. Love wasn't simple. People weren't perfect, and sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was the truth, even when that truth was complicated, painful, and 3 years too late. She threw a coin into the fountain, made a wish, not for her mother to come back, but for the courage to keep moving forward. The coin disappeared into the water with a soft splash, and Jordan Mitchell, 23 years old, daughter of Elena and Thomas, kept alive by Joseph's love and her mother's sacrifice, kept living. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. Drop a comment below and tell us what you thought about Jordan and Joseph's journey. Did Elena make the right choice? Could you forgive a secret like this? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching.